Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football. We are taking a look at some of the games on the Week 5 slate, and we are starting off with probably the biggest game in the ACC all year after Clemson beats Wake, as NC State goes on the road to Clemson. Clemson opens as a 7-point favorite. I have a lot of thoughts on this game, especially after watching the Wake Forest game, which was, I think, an underrated game for Clemson. Like going on the road against a top 25 team with a quarterback like the caliber of Sam Hartman. Anytime you can make that happen, even if it's not pretty, it is a good win for the Clemson Tigers. Before we get into it, though, just wanted to say thank you guys for all the support you guys have shown the channel. If you do like the content, you do like talking college football, consider subscribing to the channel. We really do appreciate y'all for real. Dill, I'm going to get it to you. What are your early takes on this game here?
If you asked me this at the beginning of the season, I was an NC State guy. I was very committed to the fact that this team can very much challenge Clemson. I'm not, based on what I've seen from NC State and more so even what I've seen from DJ in Clemson, I'm a little I don't think that take was right. I think Clemson looks pretty good in this spot, in my opinion.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, Clemson is just recruited so much better than any other team in the ACC. There's always going to be that talent gap. The question was, can Devin Leary outduel DJU as a quarterback? Can they have that big-time edge on the quarterback? You look at their stats through 4 games, and, I mean, DJU statistically has been the better quarterback. The only I like this NC State team, their veteran group that has a dominant defense. The question you had was, you lose a guy like Emeka Emezi, who was so valuable, was Devin Leary's go-to guy. They don't really have a guy. Taylor Thomas is a good football player, but he's kind of not that wide receiver one. And without Emeka Emezi on the outside, that explosive passing game that Devin Leary thrived in last year just doesn't really seem to be there.
And let's think about what even Clemson is struggling with on defense. It is very much an elite boundary passing game. I mean, what they couldn't deal with was Wake's guys were getting behind him and hitting big plays up the field. They weren't really working the middle of the field, which is where Thayer Thomas, their guy who's leading the team in receiving by a fair amount, that's where he likes to work. And I think that's where NC State has worked in the past when they don't have the Emeka Emezi type guy, which is essentially my concern, is you need to be able to attack those corners. That's how Wake was able to put the points up on Clemson. They couldn't. Given what you say, I'm not sure they have the personnel to do it because Devin Carter just doesn't look like he's filling the Emeka Emezi shoes.
I was high on Devin Carter. He hasn't really been that guy yet. I think he still can be that guy, but again, I agree wholeheartedly with you. Is why I like Clemson so much in the spot is you look at where Wake Forest was able to get after Clemson's defense. Easily the most effective offensive scheme against Clemson was attack those cornerbacks. They're banged up. They're down 2 starters and a rotational guy. And you could tell, I mean, those guys did not know how to play the ball in the air. They either get pass interference or get caught over. I mean, guys like A.T. Perry, Donovan Green, Jamal Banks you could add to that. Guys that are really good playing above the rim. I don't think NC State has that.
I don't think they have a guy who's in the Donovan Green or A.T. Perry realm. That's my fundamental problem because, Thayer Thomas is very good, but he's not the guy who's going to beat Clemson. They're getting beat on the edge with premier wideout play, not in the middle. They're too good in the middle. Their linebackers are very good, and their front's very good. But you kind of expose their corners. But who's going to do it?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And from a value standpoint, Dill, you weren't the only one to come in on NC State high. I mean, I saw people have them in the top 5 preseason ranks, and they definitely haven't lived up to that. But I do think you're getting a little value on Clemson, which is rare these days. It's rare that Vegas is undervaluing Clemson. I think they are here because people love NC State. And there is a lot to like about NC State. It's a veteran group. Dave Doran's done a phenomenal job recruiting but developing these guys. They have a bunch of 5th, 6-year seniors from that COVID eligibility that are ready to rock and roll. I just think at the end of the day, I don't see how NC State on offense can really hurt Clemson.
I also don't think they're going to be able to hammer the ball on them. I think NC State has taken a little bit of a step back up front. I watched them against ECU. They just couldn't rely on that part of the game. They weren't hitting plays. They were getting stopped on 4th and 1s pretty consistently. Or I shouldn't say just 4th, but just like short yardage situations. And I don't know that they're they're beating people up like they were last year. I mean, when you lose guys like obviously a Kemakwanu, like it is impossible.
And two really good running backs with Bam Knight and Ricky Pearson, which is how I thought NC State would move the ball last year, and then Devin Leary just took over the offense. But I agree. You look at that running back room, and Jalen Houston is not a guy that you're necessarily – he's not a back that you think is going to shred out Clemson. I don't think there's a single team in the country that's going to be able to shred out Clemson's front seven. Like, the way you beat Clemson is attacking the boundary vertically down the field. We already talked about it. We don't think NC State can do that. What about Clemson on the offense side of the ball? Because they are going up against – NC State's a legit top 10 defense in the country. How do you think Clemson can really attack NC State? We're not saying they need to score 35 points to win this ball game. Maybe 28 will get it done. Maybe even 21 will get it done. How do you think Clemson gets there?
Man, I think DJ, he's elevated his game back to close to what Clemson needs for them to be very competitive on the national stage. And I think you could argue there's some ways to go. I think you could say he's holding the ball a little bit. But, I mean, at the end of the day, he's making some really nice plays, and his wideouts are stepping up. I mean, Bo Collins is playing exceptionally well. Nagata seems like he's playing well. That tight end, Allen, has been incredible.
And Jake Bringenstool. Like, they have two really good tight ends that can work in the middle of the field. You're seeing Will Shipley slowly get some confidence, too, as being that five-star back that we thought he would be last year. But as a true freshman, he's coming into his own as a true sophomore. You're seeing them, I think, balance. Am I saying this Clemson offense is great? No. But I do think it's getting better by the week. And I think you're coming off a week where what was the biggest thing we talked about, DJ, and what was hurting him? The offensive line wasn't great, which I think they're significantly better than last year, but it was just confidence. And he's coming off a game where he goes, what were the stats there? 26 to 41 for 371 yards. 5 touchdowns. You see he's lost some weight, also ran for 52 yards in that short area. He's good picking up the yards. I'm not saying Clemson's going to put up 35 on NC State, but I think they're going to put up enough where they're going to create some distance against NC State. And at home, it's going to be buzzing. Give me Clemson in the points here.
Yeah, and that's my thing. I mean, I think NC State, honestly, I still think they're playing really exceptionally good defense for the most part. Had a little bit of a gap against East Carolina. I don't think they looked great, and they were not dominating that team like I think they should have. But obviously, to hold Texas Tech to 14, very impressive. That's a solid offense. And so it's not so much about – I don't think this is like the matchup that – I don't think this defense is worse than I thought it was or anything. I mean, you still got great linebacker play in a solid scheme and in an old veteran group. But I think Clemson's offense is light years ahead of where I thought they were going to be.
Light years ahead of where it was against Georgia Tech 4 weeks ago.
And that's a lot because DJ's just playing really good football. And you knew guys like Will Shipley were going to do their thing. But I just think the way DJ's playing, the way he's hitting the passes, like those back shoulder throws he was making yesterday, I was very, very impressed.
He put one on Bo Collins, too, there. He dropped it in a bucket. I mean, you see the arm talent, and again, it goes back to what was he missing was confidence. I think he had the yips all of last year and kind of going into this year, especially with the true freshman Cade Klubnik kind of breathing down your neck a little bit. I think DJ is the man. I do want to say one thing before we close it out. First big game at home for Clemson. This is going to be a close one. I don't think Clemson wins by 21 points. DJ needs to get off to a solid start because if it gets tight, say it's 7-7 going into half, DJ's throwing a pick, hasn't made some throws, I can see the Clemson crowd getting a little unruly, kind of chanting Cade's name. That's the worst case scenario. That's why I was so happy that for DJ, I was so happy that Clemson was on the road week 1. Even though he started off slow against the Georgia Tech team, you didn't have that home field. Like, if that was in Clemson, I really do think. Yeah,
when you have the real, kind of savage fans who aren't afraid. And, obviously you see it at a school like Michigan here and there and in some other big programs that, the fans expect a lot, and Clemson fans are certainly in that area. So I'm kind of with you. He can't look that bad because the fans will want Klubnik. They saw him against Georgia Tech look really good.
You saw it at Michigan a couple.
But DJ's playing well. In fairness, I thought he was going to tighten up a lot against Wake Forest, and he stayed the course and was solid right through. And that's what you need from him. And
he needed to, there were multiple times in that game where, they needed 7. They needed 7, and he went down and gave them 7. I think DJ he's kind of breaking out of that shell. he's a more confident quarterback, and I think Clemson wins this by 7. If it started at 8, if it moves down to 6.5, I love the play. I still love it at 7. I think Clemson rolls at home against NC State. Give me Clemson -7. That'll do it from the boys. Again, we appreciate you guys checking us out. If you do like the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We do appreciate y'all, and we'll talk to y'all later.